The wrench slipped from my hands and clattered onto the ceramic tile floor. Not because I was clumsy, but because of what Diana Martinez had just whispered behind me while I was crouched under her kitchen sink. In 23 years of home repair, work, through countless houses and hundreds of clients, nobody had ever made me question everything about my carefully constructed single life with just one sentence. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 weeks earlier, I was finishing up a bathroom renovation in Riverside when my phone buzzed with a new service request. The address was in Maple Heights, one of those quiet suburban neighborhoods where the houses have character and the lawns are always perfectly manicured. The client's name was Diana Martinez, and her message was straightforward. Kitchen faucet completely dead, garbage disposal making horrible grinding noises, and something about the cabinet doors not closing properly. I'd been running Henderson Home Repairs for over 2 decades, building a reputation one satisfied customer at a time. At 45, I had my routine down to a science. Show up on time, assess the problem, give a fair quote, do quality work, collect payment, move on to the next job. Clean, simple, professional. It had served me well through a messy divorce 8 years ago and helped me maintain the kind of predictable life I'd grown comfortable with. The Martinez house was a charming 1960s ranch with mature oak trees shading the front yard and a well-maintained garden that showed someone actually cared about the place. I pulled my van into the driveway Tuesday morning at exactly 9 o'clock, just as I'd promised. Diana answered the door before I could knock, almost like she'd been watching from the window. She was striking in a way that caught me off guard. Not the kind of manufactured beauty you see in magazines, but something more genuine. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, a few gray strands catching the morning light. She wore a simple blue sweater and jeans, but there was an elegance about her that made ordinary clothes look intentional. "Mr. Henderson? I'm Diana. Thank you so much for coming out on such short notice." Her handshake was firm, her smile warm but not overly familiar. Professional, which I appreciated. Too many clients either treated contractors like furniture or got too chatty and slowed down the work. "Please, call me Jake. Let's take a look at what's going on." She led me through a living room that felt lived in but organized. Family photos lined the mantelpiece, a teenage daughter in a graduation cap, what looked like parents or grandparents, a few vacation shots. No wedding pictures that I could see. But that wasn't unusual. People remove those after divorces all the time. The kitchen was spacious with good bones, but definitely showing its age. White cabinets with brass hardware, laminate countertops that had seen better days, and a backsplash that probably hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. The kind of kitchen that functioned fine but could be spectacular with the right attention. "So the faucet just stopped working yesterday morning," Diana explained, gesturing toward the sink. "No warning, no gradual decline. I turned it on to make coffee and nothing. The disposal has been making that awful noise for about a week, and these cabinet doors?" She demonstrated how several doors hung crooked, not quite meeting their frames. Set my toolbox on the counter and started my usual inspection. The faucet issue was likely the cartridge, a common problem in fixtures that age. The disposal sounded like something had gotten stuck in the grinding mechanism. The cabinet doors were a simple matter of adjusting the hinges. "This shouldn't take more than a couple hours," I told her. "The faucet cartridge needs replacing. I'll need to fish whatever's jamming your disposal out of there, and the cabinet doors just need their hinges adjusted. Pretty straightforward stuff. Would you like some coffee while you work?" I made a fresh pot, though I had to boil water on the stove like some kind of pioneer. There was humor in her voice, the kind that suggested she didn't take herself too seriously. Most clients either disappeared once I started working or hovered nervously, asking questions about every step. Diana seemed like she'd find the middle ground. "Coffee would be great, thanks." She poured 2 mugs from a French press, good coffee, not the usual instant stuff, and then settled at the kitchen table with what looked like work papers. She was some kind of consultant, I gathered from overhearing a phone call, something involving marketing strategies for small businesses. I started with the disposal, disconnecting it to clear out what turned out to be a small piece of broken glass that had somehow made its way down the drain. The grinding noise disappeared immediately once I removed the obstruction and reconnected everything. One down, I called over to Diana, who looked up from her laptop with a smile. The cabinet doors were next, and I worked systematically around the kitchen, adjusting hinges and realigning doors. It was meditative work, the kind of simple problem-solving that had drawn me to this profession in the first place. There was satisfaction in taking something that didn't work properly and making it right again. Diana worked quietly at her table, occasionally taking phone calls in a voice that was both professional and personable. She had a good laugh, I noticed, not forced or performative, but genuine. When she did speak to me, it was usually something practical about the house or a question about the repair work that showed she was actually paying attention. "I've been putting off these little fixes for months," she admitted during one of our brief conversations. "It's funny how you can live with things being slightly wrong until they become completely broken." "That's most of my business," I replied, testing a cabinet door that now closed properly. "People wait until the small problems become big ones. Though in your case, these were all still pretty small. I guess I'm just not very handy. My ex-husband used to handle all of this stuff, and after the divorce I kept meaning to learn, but..." She shrugged, not in a helpless way, but matter-of-factly. "There are only so many hours in the day, you know." I did know. After my own divorce, I'd had to learn plenty of things Linda used to handle: cooking actual meals, keeping track of social obligations, remembering to buy birthday cards for my sister's kids. We all have our skill sets. The faucet cartridge was the biggest job, requiring me to shut off the water to the house and work in the cramped space under the sink. I'd done this repair hundreds of times, but every setup was slightly different. Diana's plumbing was older but well-maintained, which made the job easier. I was threading the new cartridge into place when Diana appeared beside me, crouching down to see what I was doing. "Is it complicated?" she asked. "Not really. Just a matter of getting everything lined up properly. The tricky part is usually getting the old cartridge out, but yours wasn't too stubborn." She was close enough that I caught a hint of her perfume. Something subtle and warm, not overpowering. When I glanced over, she was genuinely interested in the repair process, not just making conversation. "I should probably learn how to do some of this myself," she said. "I hate feeling helpless about basic home maintenance." "It's not about being helpless. Everyone has different skills. I couldn't do whatever it is you do for work, but I can fix a faucet. That's why we have specialization." "Marketing consulting," she said. "I help small businesses figure out how to reach their customers more effectively. Probably not nearly as useful as what you do." "Different kinds of useful," I said, tightening the final connection. "Ready to test this?" I turned the water back on at the main valve, and we both watched as I turned the faucet handle. Perfect water pressure, no leaks, smooth operation. "You're a magician," Diana said, and there was something in her voice, not just gratitude, but genuine appreciation for skilled work done well. By the time I finished and packed up my tools, it was nearly noon. Diana insisted on making lunch, while I wrote up the invoice. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and homemade soup that was better than anything I usually grabbed between jobs. We ate at her kitchen table, talking about the neighborhood, the house's history, her daughter who was starting her sophomore year at UC Davis. Normal, comfortable conversation that felt natural rather than forced. "What's your next project?" she asked as I prepared to leave. "Couple in Westfield needs their master bathroom completely gutted and rebuilt. Should keep me busy for the next 3 weeks." She walked me to the door, and I handed her the invoice. Our fingers brushed briefly as she took it, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. That moment of awareness when you realize you're attracted to someone, and they might be attracted to you too. "Thank you, Jake. Really. It's such a relief to have everything working properly again. Just doing my job. Call if you have any other issues." But as I drove away, I found myself hoping she would call, even though that was completely against my usual professional protocol. There had been something about Diana Martinez that stayed with me. Her laugh, her genuine interest in the work, the way she made even a simple lunch feel like something special. I told myself it was just because she'd been a pleasant client, but I knew it was more than that. For the first time in years, someone had made me curious about possibilities beyond my carefully ordered routine. The Westfield bathroom project turned out to be more complicated than expected. What the homeowners thought was a simple tile replacement revealed water damage behind the shower wall that required ripping out half the bathroom down to the studs. It was the kind of discovery that could derail a timeline and a budget. But it was also exactly the type of problem-solving that kept my work interesting. I was knee-deep in demolition, literally covered in dust and debris, when my phone rang. Thursday afternoon. Diana Martinez's name appeared on the screen, and I found myself answering faster than I normally would during work hours. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jake? I'm so sorry to bother you, but I have a bit of an emergency. Her voice carried a stress I hadn't heard during our first meeting. In the background, I could hear what sounded like running water. What's happening? The pipe under the kitchen sink just burst. There's water everywhere, and I can't figure out how to shut it off. I've tried turning the valves under the sink, but nothing's stopping it. I was already mentally calculating drive time from Westfield to Maple Heights. 25 minutes if traffic cooperated. Diana, listen carefully. Go to your basement or wherever your water main comes into the house. Look for a valve near where the main line enters. It might have a red handle or a wheel you turn clockwise. That should shut off water to the entire house. Okay. I'm going down to the basement now. Hold on. I could hear her footsteps on the stairs, then some rustling around. A few moments later, the sound of running water in the background stopped. Got it. Oh my God, thank you. The water stopped. Good. Now grab some towels and start soaking up what you can. I'm finishing something up here, but I can be there in about an hour. Will that work? Yes, absolutely. I can't thank you enough, Jake. I was starting to panic. After hanging up, I found myself working with more urgency to wrap up the Westfield job for the day. My client was understanding when I explained I had an emergency call, especially since we were ahead of schedule despite the complications. The drive to Diana's house gave me time to think about why I was prioritizing her call over my usual policy of scheduling emergency visits for the next available slot. Emergency rates were higher, but that wasn't the motivation. The truth was, I wanted to help her specifically, and that realization made me slightly uncomfortable. Diana met me at the door, wearing different clothes than our phone conversation. She'd clearly changed out of wet things into a sweater and jeans that somehow looked more put together than my work clothes ever did, even when they weren't covered in bathroom renovation dust. You look like you've had quite a day, she said, noticing my appearance. Bathroom renovation that turned into an archaeology project, but let's see what we're dealing with here. The kitchen floor was mostly dry, though I could see where she'd been working with towels. She'd done a good job managing the immediate crisis. Under the sink, the problem was obvious. The connection joint where I'd worked on the faucet cartridge had failed, probably due to the age of the existing plumbing. This isn't your fault, I told her immediately, seeing the worry in her expression. This is just old plumbing finally giving up. The work I did earlier this week didn't cause this, but it probably revealed how fragile some of these connections were getting. So what does that mean? I examined the entire under-sink plumbing setup more thoroughly than I had during the initial service call. What I found wasn't surprising, but wasn't great news either. Honestly, most of this plumbing should be replaced. It's not just this one joint. I can see several connections that are on their last legs. You're probably looking at having most of the kitchen supply lines redone. Diana sat down at her kitchen table, and I could see her processing both the inconvenience and the likely expense. Is it something that has to be done immediately, or can I plan for it? With the main water shut off, you don't have water in the house right now. I can do a temporary repair that'll get you back up and running, but honestly, you'll probably be dealing with more failures over the next few months if we don't address the underlying issue. She was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing options. What would you recommend? If it were my house, I'd bite the bullet and do it right. Replace all the supply lines in the kitchen, maybe check the main bathroom while we're at it. It's disruptive for a few days, but then you're set for the next 20 years. And cost-wise? I gave her a rough estimate that made her wince slightly, but she didn't dismiss it outright. Let me think about it overnight. Can you do the temporary fix so I at least have water tonight? Of course. The temporary repair took about 45 minutes and involved creative use of compression fittings and prayer. It would hold, but it wasn't a permanent solution by any means. As I worked, Diana moved around the kitchen, cleaning up the remaining water damage and straightening things that had been displaced during the emergency. We fell into an easy rhythm of conversation, picking up threads from our earlier meeting. Your daughter's at UC Davis, you mentioned? Sarah, yes. She's studying environmental science, wants to save the world, which I completely support, though I worry about her finding a career that can actually pay the bills. What's she like? Diana's whole demeanor softened when talking about her daughter. Smart, determined, idealistic in the best way. She gets frustrated with people who don't care about the environment as much as she does, but she's learning that you have to meet people where they are if you want to create change. Sounds like she got some good parenting. We've had our moments. The teenage years were intense, but she's turned into someone I genuinely like spending time with. Not just love because she's my daughter. I finished the temporary repair and tested it carefully. Everything held, water pressure was good, no immediate leaks. That should get you through until you decide about the bigger project, I said, packing up my tools. Jake, can I ask you something? I looked up from my toolbox. Diana was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, expression thoughtful. Sure. Do you ever take on projects that aren't strictly emergency repairs? Like, if someone wanted to update their kitchen more extensively? You mean like a renovation? I've been thinking about it for a while. This house has good bones, but the kitchen feels stuck in 1987. If I'm going to be replacing the plumbing anyway, maybe it makes sense to think bigger. This was moving into territory I needed to be careful about. Kitchen renovations were complex, expensive projects that could easily go wrong and damage professional relationships. But looking around Diana's kitchen, I could see the potential she was talking about. I do some renovation work, but kitchen projects are different animals. They're disruptive. They always cost more than people expect. And they take longer than anyone wants. You really have to be committed to the process. What would something like that involve? I found myself walking through her kitchen, pointing out possibilities. The layout was actually good. The work triangle between sink, stove, and refrigerator was efficient. But the cabinets were dated, the countertops were worn, and the appliances were mismatched and aging. You could keep the basic layout, which would save money. New cabinets or reface the existing ones, definitely new countertops, updated appliances, new flooring, probably some electrical work for better lighting and outlets. Time frame? If we did it right, planned properly, ordered everything in advance, maybe 3 weeks for the actual work, but several weeks of planning beforehand. Diana walked through the space, clearly envisioning possibilities. Would you be interested in a project like that? The question hung in the air between us. Professional me should have given her a few contractor referrals who specialized in kitchen renovations. Personally, the part that was increasingly interested in Diana Martinez as more than just a client wanted to say yes immediately. Let me put together some preliminary ideas and a rough estimate, I heard myself saying. No commitment from either of us, but it might help you decide if it's worth pursuing. That would be amazing. As I prepared to leave, Diana walked me to the door again. This was becoming a comfortable ritual, these few moments of transition between work and whatever came next. Thank you for coming out so quickly today. I know you probably had other things to do. That's what emergency service is for. But we both knew it was more than that. I'd rearranged my day because she'd called, and she'd called me specifically instead of any other contractor in the city. I'll put together those kitchen ideas over the weekend and email them to you early next week. I'd like that. Standing at her front door, autumn evening settling around us, I realized we were lingering in a way that felt less professional and more personal. Diana seemed to realize it too. Have a good weekend, Jake. You too, Diana. Driving home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing lines I'd carefully maintained for years. Diana Martinez was becoming more than a client, and I wasn't sure that was wise for either of us. I spent Saturday morning at my kitchen table with graph paper, measuring tape notes, and my laptop, sketching out renovation possibilities for Diana's kitchen. This wasn't how I usually spent weekends. Typically, I kept strict boundaries between work time and personal time, a habit developed after my divorce when maintaining structure felt essential. But Diana's kitchen presented an interesting challenge. The space had character that newer homes lacked, with high ceilings and natural light that could be maximized with the right design choices. I found myself getting caught up in the creative aspects, imagining how different elements could transform the functionality while respecting the home's original architecture. By Sunday evening, I had 3 different renovation concepts sketched out, complete with material suggestions and rough cost estimates. The most conservative approach focused on updating surfaces and fixtures while keeping the existing layout. The middle option involved reconfiguring the cabinet arrangement and adding an island. The ambitious plan would open up the wall between the kitchen and dining room, creating a more contemporary flow. Monday morning, I emailed the concepts to Diana with detailed explanations of each option. Her response came back within an hour. "These are incredible. Could we meet this week to discuss them? I have so many questions." We scheduled a meeting for Wednesday evening, after my regular work hours. Diana suggested I come for dinner, which felt like another step away from purely professional interaction, but I accepted anyway. The Westfield bathroom project hit another snag Tuesday, when we discovered the subfloor damage was more extensive than initially apparent. What should have been a straightforward day of installing new fixtures turned into carefully removing and replacing sections of rotted flooring. My clients were understanding but clearly frustrated with the extended timeline. By the time I arrived at Diana's house Wednesday evening, I was tired, slightly behind schedule, and wondering if I was making good decisions about mixing business with what felt increasingly like personal interest. Diana answered the door in a dress I hadn't seen before. Nothing fancy, but it was clear she'd put thought into her appearance. The kitchen smelled amazing, something involving garlic and herbs that made me realize I'd forgotten to eat lunch. "Perfect timing," she said. "I hope you like pasta. I figured if we're going to redesign the kitchen, I should make good use of it while it's still intact." The dinner was excellent. Homemade marinara sauce with fresh basil, garlic bread that was actually toasted properly, and a salad with ingredients that clearly came from somewhere better than a grocery store bag. We spread my renovation sketches across the table between the salad and main course. "I keep coming back to option 2, Diana said, pointing to the middle concept. "The island would give me so much more counter space, and I love the idea of the breakfast bar seating. It's a good balance between transformation and budget. The plumbing modifications aren't too complex, and we wouldn't need structural changes." "What about the timeline?" 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we run into unexpected issues. Which we probably will. There are always surprises once you start opening up walls and floors. Diana poured wine with dinner, nothing expensive, but something that paired well with the food and felt appropriate for the conversation. I usually didn't drink during business meetings, but this was starting to feel less like business, and more like dinner with someone whose company I genuinely enjoyed. "Can I ask you something personal?" Diana said as we moved to the living room with coffee and the renovation plans. "Sure. You mentioned you were divorced. Was that recent?" The question was direct but not invasive, asked with the kind of genuine curiosity that suggested she was interested in me as a person, not just gathering information. 8 years ago. We were married for 12 years, but the last few weren't great. Linda wanted different things than I did, and we couldn't find middle ground. That's hard. Sarah's father and I divorced when she was 10. Different reasons, but the same sense of growing in different directions. "How long have you been divorced?" 12 years now. Sarah was old enough to understand what was happening, which was both easier and harder. Easier because we didn't have to manage custody arrangements around a toddler's schedule. Harder because she had opinions about everything and wasn't shy about sharing them. We talked about the complexities of divorce, the ways it changed how you approached relationships, the challenge of rebuilding life around new priorities. It was the kind of conversation I rarely had with anyone, certainly not with clients. "Have you dated much since?" Diana asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. "Sorry, that's probably too personal." "No, it's okay. Some, but nothing serious. I think I got comfortable with my routine, and maybe too cautious about disrupting it." Understand that completely. For the first few years after my divorce, I was so focused on managing everything as a single parent that dating felt like another item on an already overwhelming to-do list. "And now?" Diana smiled, but there was something wistful about it. "Now, Sarah's in college, my business is stable, and I have space in my life for other things. But meeting people at 52 is different than meeting people at 30. The pool is smaller. Everyone has more history, more complications, more caution too." "Exactly." though sometimes I wonder if being cautious is protecting me or just keeping me from taking risks that might be worth it. The conversation felt like it was approaching territory we hadn't explicitly acknowledged yet. I could feel the shift in energy between us. The way awareness was becoming attraction was becoming possibility. About the renovation, I said, redirecting us back to safer ground. If you decide to move forward, we should start planning material orders soon. Lead times on cabinets and appliances can be significant. I want to do it, Diana said without hesitation. Option 2. The island design. When could we start? I'd need to finish the Westfield project first, probably another week and a half. Then I'd want to spend a few days on detailed measurements and finalizing material selections. We could potentially start a demo the first week of November. Demo sounds so violent. It can be, but it's also the most satisfying part. There's something therapeutic about tearing out things that aren't working and starting fresh. Diana laughed. I can see the appeal of that. We spent another hour going through details, cabinet styles, countertop materials, appliance preferences. Diana had clear opinions but was open to suggestions, especially about practical considerations she hadn't thought of. She wanted the space to be beautiful but also functional for someone who actually cooked regularly. I should probably head out, I said eventually, noticing it was past 9 o'clock. This was really helpful for planning purposes. And the dinner? The dinner was excellent. Much better than my usual Wednesday night meal of whatever leftovers are in the refrigerator. Diana walked me to the door, and we lingered in that transitional space again. The evening had felt more like a date than a business meeting, and I think we both recognized that. Jake, can I say something? Of course. I really enjoy spending time with you. Not just because you're solving my household problems, but because you're good company. The directness of it surprised me. In my experience, these kinds of conversations usually involved more dancing around the subject. I enjoy spending time with you too, I said, which is why I want to be careful about mixing business with other things. Other things? Personal things. I don't want to complicate the renovation project, and I don't want either of us to feel awkward if things get complicated between us. Diana nodded thoughtfully. So, what do you suggest? Maybe we see how the renovation goes and then see where we are when it's finished? That sounds reasonable, she said, but there was something in her expression that suggested she might have preferred a different answer. Standing at her front door, autumn air cool around us, I realized I was simultaneously looking forward to and dreading the next few weeks. Working closely with Diana on her kitchen renovation would mean seeing her regularly, being in her space, collaborating on something that would transform her home. It would also mean maintaining professional boundaries while feeling increasingly unprofessional thoughts about her. I'll email you a contract and material list by Friday, I said. Sounds perfect. As I drove home, I wondered if I was making the right choice or just postponing an inevitable complication. Either way, I was committed to the project now, and to spending the next month trying to renovate Diana Martinez's kitchen while pretending I wasn't falling for Diana Martinez herself. The Westfield bathroom project finally wrapped up on a Friday afternoon, 2 weeks later than originally planned, but with results that exceeded everyone's expectations. What had started as a simple tile replacement had become a complete transformation that added significant value to the home. My clients were thrilled. I was exhausted, and I had the weekend to prepare for what would either be the best or worst decision I'd made in recent memory. Diana's kitchen renovation was scheduled to begin Monday morning. Over the past 2 weeks, while I'd been wrestling with rotted subfloors and unexpected plumbing configurations, Diana and I had exchanged dozens of emails about cabinet hardware, paint colors, and appliance specifications. Each email felt slightly more personal than necessary. Small details about her day or questions about mine tucked between discussions of backsplash materials and lighting fixtures. Saturday morning, I drove to 3 different suppliers, double-checking that all materials would be delivered on schedule. Kitchen renovations lived or died by logistics, having the right materials at the right time in the right sequence. One delayed shipment could derail an entire timeline. At the cabinet showroom, I ran into Marcus Webb, another contractor I'd known for years. We'd worked on a few projects together and maintained the kind of professional friendship common in the trades. Jake, haven't seen you around lately. Heard you landed a big kitchen job in Maple Heights. Word traveled fast in our small community of contractors and suppliers. "Where'd you hear that?" "Tony at the hardware store mentioned you were ordering some high-end cabinet hardware. Must be a nice project." "It's a good renovation. Interesting space, client who knows what she wants." Marcus grinned. "Client who knows what she wants? Or client you want to know better?" "What's that supposed to mean?" "Come on, man. I've known you for 15 years. You don't usually get this detailed about material selections unless there's something extra motivating you." Marcus wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to discuss Diana with another contractor. Just trying to do quality work. "Sure you are. Well, whoever she is, she's got good taste in contractors." Sunday evening, I sat in my truck outside Diana's house for a few minutes before going to the door. Tomorrow would begin 3 weeks of working in her space, seeing her daily, trying to maintain professional boundaries while managing whatever was developing between us. Diana answered the door in jeans and an old sweatshirt, hair pulled back, clearly dressed for the disruption that was about to overtake her home. "Ready for chaos?" I asked. "As ready as anyone can be for having their kitchen torn apart. Come on, let me show you what I've cleared out." She'd done an impressive job preparing for the renovation. The kitchen was completely emptied, appliances moved to the garage, dishes and cookware packed away. A temporary kitchen was set up in the dining room with a coffee maker, microwave, and hot plate. I've been living on sandwiches and takeout for the past few days, getting used to the idea of not having a real kitchen for a while. "It'll be worth it," I said, looking around the empty space. "But it's definitely going to get worse before it gets better." We walked through the planned demolition sequence. Cabinet removal first, then countertops, then flooring. The old backsplash would come down last after we'd protected the walls. I'd scheduled the dumpster delivery for early Monday morning. "Any last-minute doubts?" I asked. Diana looked around her empty kitchen, and for a moment, I saw uncertainty cross her face. "It's just strange, you know? This kitchen has been exactly the same for the 12 years I've lived here. It's where I made Sarah's birthday cakes, where we did homework at the table, where I learned to cook for one person after the divorce. There are a lot of memories in this space." "The memories aren't in the cabinets," I said gently. "They're in on what happened here. The new kitchen will have new memories." "You're right, and honestly, I'm excited to see what it becomes." Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that made demolition work feel especially destructive. I arrived at 7:30 with my crew, 2 guys I'd worked with regularly, Tom Rodriguez and Kevin Barnes. Both were skilled, reliable, and professional enough to handle working in a client's home without making anyone uncomfortable. Diana had coffee ready and stayed to watch the first phase of cabinet removal. There was something both satisfying and melancholy about dismantling a kitchen that had functioned for decades. Each cabinet that came down revealed layers of history: rings from water glasses on shelves, spice stains, the accumulated patina of daily use. "It's like archaeological excavation," Diana observed, watching Tom carefully remove the cabinet doors. "Every renovation tells a story," I agreed. "You can read a lot about how people lived by what you find when you tear things apart." Behind the sink cabinet we discovered a small collection of children's artwork that had apparently fallen down over the years. Diana's face lit up when she saw crayon drawings clearly made by a much younger Sarah. "I wondered where some of these had gone," she said, carefully gathering the papers. "Sarah must have been 6 or 7 when she made these." The morning progressed smoothly. Tom and Kevin worked efficiently while Diana split her time between watching the demolition and managing work calls from her temporary office setup in the living room. I found myself aware of her presence in a way that was both pleasant and distracting. Around noon, Diana appeared with sandwiches for everyone, a gesture that surprised my crew and probably crossed the line from client courtesy into something more personal. "You didn't need to do that," I told her as Tom and Kevin took their lunch break outside. "I know. But you're all working hard, and it felt right." We ate our sandwiches standing in what remained of her kitchen, surrounded by the controlled destruction of the morning's work. "How are you feeling about it so far?" I asked. "Good. Better than I expected, actually. There's something liberating about watching it all come down. Like you said yesterday, sometimes you have to tear out what isn't working." "We're just getting started. Tomorrow we'll be into the real mess, flooring and wall prep. I trust you, Diana said, and there was something in the way she said it that felt like more than professional confidence. The afternoon brought the countertop removal, which required careful work to avoid damaging the walls. The old laminate had been installed with construction adhesive that had hardened over decades, making removal slow and labor-intensive. Diana had client calls scheduled throughout the afternoon, so she worked from the living room while we continued the demolition. I could hear fragments of her conversations. She was clearly good at her job, speaking with authority about marketing strategies and brand positioning. There was something attractive about competence, about watching someone excel in their field. By late afternoon, the kitchen was down to bare walls and subfloor. What had been a functional space that morning was now an empty shell waiting for transformation. Tom and Kevin loaded the last debris into the dumpster and headed home, leaving Diana and me alone with the destruction. "Want to see something interesting?" I asked, pointing to a section of wall we'd exposed behind the old cabinets. Diana joined me where I was kneeling beside an electrical outlet. The wallpaper pattern visible behind the outlet was different from anything we'd seen elsewhere in the house, bright yellow with small flowers, very 1970s. This was probably the original kitchen wallpaper, I explained. When they installed the cabinets, they just covered it up instead of removing it. "It's actually kind of charming," Diana said, crouching beside me to look closer. "Very retro." She was close enough that I caught that same subtle perfume I'd noticed during our first meeting. Close enough that when she turned to look at me, I could see the small scar near her left eyebrow that I'd never noticed before. "Tomorrow we'll get this all cleaned up and start the real work," I said, standing up perhaps more quickly than necessary. "Jake." Diana stood up too, brushing dust off her jeans. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you okay with this arrangement? Working here every day, I mean. I don't want things to be awkward." The directness of the question caught me off guard, but I appreciated it. "Are you okay with it?" I asked first. "It's complicated," I admitted. "But I'm committed to doing excellent work on your kitchen, regardless of any complications." "What if the complications turn out to be good complications?" "Diana, I know. Professional boundaries. But I wanted you to know that I'm not going to make things difficult for you. I just think we should acknowledge that there's something happening here." She was right, of course. Pretending there wasn't attraction between us was becoming more difficult every day. "Let's see how the renovation goes," I said, falling back on the same response I'd given her weeks earlier. "Fair enough," Diana said, but she was smiling. "Though, for the record, I think you're being overly cautious." As I packed up my tools and prepared to leave, I realized that Diana Martinez was probably right about my caution. But I also realized that some situations were worth being careful about, especially when the stakes felt higher than they had in years. Tuesday morning brought the kind of complications that made me question why I'd ever thought kitchen renovations were a good idea. The flooring removal revealed that the subfloor wasn't level. A common issue in older homes, but one that would require additional time and materials to correct before we could install the new tile. I was explaining the situation to Diana when her daughter Sarah arrived unexpectedly, home for a long weekend from UC Davis. I'd heard plenty about Sarah over the past few weeks, but meeting her in person was different. She had Diana's direct gaze and confident manner, but with the added intensity that came from being 20 years old and convinced she could fix the world's problems. "Mom, what happened to our kitchen?" Sarah asked, staring at the gutted space, with obvious shock. "I told you I was doing renovations," Diana replied, though I could tell she was slightly flustered by her daughter's surprise visit. "You said you were updating things. This looks like a bomb went off." "Sarah, this is Jake Henderson, the contractor I mentioned. Jake, my daughter Sarah." Sarah looked me over with the kind of evaluation reserved for people dating your parent. "So you're the one who convinced my mom to tear apart the kitchen where I learned to make pancakes." "Your mom made this decision entirely on her own," I said diplomatically, "though I think she'll be happy with the results. We'll see. Mom has a history of starting projects and not finishing them." "Sarah!" Diana's embarrassment was obvious. "What? Remember the garden renovation that lasted 3 days? Or the time you were going to learn pottery?" I found myself in the awkward position of witnessing family dynamics I had no business observing. Tom and Kevin had wisely made themselves busy in the garage, preparing materials for the subfloor repair. Your mom seems very committed to this project, I said, trying to diffuse the tension. And we're already making good progress. Sarah studied the demolished kitchen with the critical eye of someone who'd grown up in the space. It does have potential. I always thought this kitchen was stuck in the past. That's exactly what I was thinking, Diana said, clearly relieved that Sarah was warming to the idea. Though I have to say, Jake, my mom talks about you a lot for someone who's supposedly just hired to fix her kitchen. The comment hung in the air like dust from the demolition. Diana turned bright red, and I felt heat rising in my own face. Sarah Elizabeth Martinez, I do not talk about Jake a lot. You mentioned him at least 6 times during our phone call Sunday night. Jake thinks this. Jake suggested that Jake has such interesting ideas about cabinet hardware. I was updating you on the renovation progress. Right. Renovation progress. Sarah grinned at me. She also mentioned you're single and approximately her age. That's enough, Diana said firmly, but I could see she was fighting a smile. I'm just saying, Mom's been alone for 12 years. If she's finally found someone worth talking about 6 times in one phone conversation, I'm interested in meeting him. I decided the safest course was to redirect everyone's attention to the work at hand. Sarah, want to see what we're planning for the new layout? The next hour was spent showing Sarah the renovation plans, explaining the timeline, and listening to her suggestions about environmentally sustainable materials and energy-efficient appliances. She was clearly her mother's daughter. Intelligent, opinionated, and not shy about expressing her views. You should definitely go with the bamboo cutting boards instead of plastic, Sarah told her mother, and make sure the new appliances have high energy efficiency ratings. I've already considered all of that, Diana replied with the patience of someone who'd been receiving unsolicited advice from her daughter for 20 years. By noon, Sarah had claimed the living room couch as her temporary bedroom and settled in to observe the renovation process. Her presence changed the dynamic considerably. Conversation between Diana and me became more careful, more obviously professional, though I caught Sarah watching us with interest during our interactions. The subfloor repair took most of the afternoon. Working with Tom and Kevin, we removed sections of uneven flooring and installed new support joists to create a level surface for the tile installation. It was tedious, precise work that required constant measuring and adjustment. Diana split her time between client calls and checking on our progress, while Sarah worked on a research paper for one of her environmental science classes. The domestic scene felt comfortable in a way that surprised me. The rhythms of work continuing around normal life, the easy inclusion of family, the sense of being part of something larger than just a professional service contract. Around 4 o'clock, Sarah appeared in the doorway while I was checking measurements for the tile layout. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure. Are you interested in my mom?" Tom and Kevin suddenly found reasons to step outside, leaving me alone with Sarah's direct question. "Your mom is a wonderful person," I said carefully. "That's not what I asked." Sarah had Diana's same straightforward approach to communication, but without the social courtesy that came with age and experience. "It's complicated," I said finally. "Why?" "Professional boundaries. She's a client. I'm trying to do quality work without other factors complicating the relationship." Sarah sat down on a sawhorse, clearly settling in for a longer conversation. "You know what's interesting about my mom?" "What's that?" "She's been alone for 12 years, and I can count on one hand the number of times she's mentioned being interested in someone. She throws herself into work, into being my mom, into her friends and hobbies, but she never talks about wanting to date anyone." I continued measuring tile layouts, unsure how to respond to this information. "Until recently," Sarah continued. "Suddenly she's talking about this contractor who's so professional and skilled and thoughtful. She mentioned that you suggested she might want to consider updating the lighting in the living room too, and that you noticed she had good coffee. Those were just professional observations. Jake, my mom doesn't notice when men notice her. She's attractive. She's successful. She's kind, but she's completely oblivious to male attention. Trust me, I've watched it happen for years." "What's your point?" "My point is that if my mom is talking about you 6 times in one phone call, it means she's interested. And if you're interested too, maybe the professional boundary thing is an excuse to avoid taking a risk. Before I could respond, Diana appeared in the doorway. Sarah, are you interrogating Jake about tile layouts? We were discussing installation techniques, Sarah said innocently. Diana looked suspicious but didn't pursue it. Jake, I wanted to ask about the timeline for the island installation. I know we're running a day behind because of the subfloor issues. We should be back on schedule by tomorrow afternoon. The island base gets delivered Thursday morning, and we'll install it Friday. Perfect. Sarah, want to see the cabinet samples? You can help me decide on the final hardware choices. After Sarah left with her mother, Tom and Kevin returned from their extended break outside. That kid's got your number, Tom said, grinning. What do you mean? She's looking out for her mom, making sure you're not going to break her heart or disappear after the job's done. It's not like that. Sure it isn't, Kevin added. That's why you've been measuring the same tile section 3 times in the past 20 minutes. That evening, after Tom and Kevin left and Diana was having dinner with Sarah, I found myself thinking about Sarah's words. Was I using professional boundaries as an excuse to avoid risk? Diana had been clear about her interest, and I couldn't deny my own feelings anymore. But kitchen renovations were complicated enough without adding relationship dynamics. If things went wrong between Diana and me, I'd still need to finish the job, still need to maintain professional standards, still need to ensure she was satisfied with the work. On the other hand, Sarah was right about one thing. Diana Martinez was an exceptional woman, and opportunities like this didn't come along often. Maybe being overly cautious was just another way of being afraid. As I drove home through the October evening, I realized I had 2 more weeks of renovation work to figure out what I really wanted and whether I was brave enough to pursue it. The kitchen was taking shape beautifully, but the more personal project was still very much under construction. The final week of renovation brought that familiar mixture of satisfaction and melancholy that came with completing a major project. Diana's kitchen was transforming into something beautiful. The new cabinets installed perfectly, countertops templated and ready for installation, tile work progressing smoothly. But it also meant our daily interactions were numbered, and I still hadn't figured out how to navigate what was happening between us. Sarah had returned to Davis after extracting a promise from her mother to send daily progress photos. Her parting comment to me was characteristically direct. Don't overthink this, Jake. Life's too short, and my mom deserves to be happy. Thursday morning brought the countertop installation, always a critical moment in any kitchen renovation. The granite slabs we'd selected were a warm gray with subtle veining that complemented the white cabinets beautifully. The installation required precision measuring and careful handling, but the results were immediately impressive. Diana stood in her partially completed kitchen, running her hands over the smooth granite surface with obvious delight. It's exactly what I imagined, she said. Better, actually. Wait until we get the backsplash installed and the island finished, I said. It's going to be spectacular. Tom and Kevin were putting finishing touches on the cabinet hardware while I worked on the final electrical connections for the under-cabinet lighting. The kitchen was coming together with the kind of seamless integration that made all the planning and careful execution worthwhile. Jake, Diana said, appearing beside me as I tested the new lighting system. Can we talk for a minute? I followed her to the living room, where she'd been working during the renovation. Her temporary office setup looked oddly permanent now, with client files organized on the dining table and her laptop permanently stationed on a side table. I wanted to say something before the project finishes, she began, settling on the couch and gesturing for me to sit across from her. Of course. I know you've been careful about maintaining professional boundaries, and I respect that. You've done incredible work, and I don't want anything to compromise that or make things awkward between us. I waited, sensing there was more coming. But I also think we'd both be foolish to pretend there isn't something real happening here. I haven't felt this way about anyone in years, Jake. Maybe ever, if I'm being completely honest. The directness of it took my breath away. Diana wasn't playing games or dropping hints. She was putting her feelings on the table with the same straightforward approach she brought to everything else. Diana, let me finish, she said gently. I'm not asking you to make any decisions. Right now, I know you need to complete the project, and I understand why that's important to you professionally. But I wanted you to know that when this renovation is finished, I'd like to explore what this could be, if you're interested. I looked at Diana Martinez. Successful, beautiful, kind, direct, offering me exactly what I'd been wanting, but hadn't allowed myself to pursue. The smart, cautious part of me that had governed my life since my divorce was screaming warnings about complications and risks. But a larger part of me, the part that had been dormant for years, was ready to take the chance. "I'm interested," I said simply. Diana's smile was radiant. "Good. Then let's finish this kitchen and see what happens next." Friday brought the island installation and final touches. Cabinet hardware adjustments, switch plate installations, final cleanup. Tom and Kevin worked efficiently while Diana and I maintained our professional dynamic, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation that hadn't been there before. The island looked perfect in the space, providing the additional workspace and storage Diana had wanted while creating a natural gathering spot that opened up the kitchen's flow. The breakfast bar seating was exactly the right height, and the electrical outlets were positioned perfectly for small appliances. "One more day," Tom announced as they packed up Friday afternoon. "Touch-ups tomorrow morning, final walkthrough, and we're done." After Tom and Kevin left, Diana and I stood in her nearly completed kitchen. The transformation was remarkable. What had been dated and cramped was now open, functional, and beautiful. Every detail we'd planned together had come together perfectly. "I can't believe it's almost finished," Diana said. "How does it feel?" "Amazing. Better than I imagined. But also a little sad that the process is ending." I understood completely. The renovation had given us a framework for spending time together, a legitimate reason to see each other daily, to collaborate on something meaningful. Without that structure, we'd have to figure out what came next. Saturday morning, I arrived early to complete the final punch list. Minor adjustments, cleaning, testing all systems one final time. Diana had coffee ready and homemade muffins that filled the kitchen with the smell of cinnamon and vanilla. "First baking project in the new kitchen," she announced proudly. The muffins were excellent, and there was something deeply satisfying about eating breakfast in the space we'd created together. The morning light streamed through the windows, highlighting the clean lines of the cabinets and the subtle patterns in the granite countertops. By noon, everything was complete. The kitchen was spotless, all systems tested and working perfectly. Final photos taken from my portfolio. Tom and Kevin had left after helping load the remaining tools and leftover materials. Diana and I stood in her finished kitchen, and the silence felt loaded with possibility. "So," she said finally. "So. The renovation is officially complete." "It is. What do you think?" Diana walked through the space, opening cabinets, testing the soft close hinges, running water at the new sink, adjusting the under-cabinet lighting. Everything worked perfectly. "I think it's the most beautiful kitchen I've ever seen," she said. "And I think you do incredible work." "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." "Jake, can I ask you something?" "Always." "At 52, I've never met someone like you. Someone who listens carefully, who pays attention to details, who takes pride in doing things right. Someone who makes me feel like myself, but better somehow." She paused, looking directly at me. "Are you single?" The question hit me with the force of everything we'd been dancing around for weeks. All the professional caution, all the careful boundaries, all the reasons to wait until the project was finished. None of it mattered anymore. "Yes," I said. "I'm single." "Good," Diana said, stepping closer. "Because I'd really like to take you to dinner tonight. Somewhere that isn't my kitchen, where we can talk about things that have nothing to do with cabinet hardware or tile layouts." "I'd like that too." "Really?" "Really. Though I have to warn you, I'm probably going to be terrible at this. It's been a long time since I've dated anyone I actually cared about impressing." Diana laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I think you'll figure it out. You're pretty good at most things you put your mind to." Standing in her beautiful new kitchen, with afternoon light streaming through the windows and the promise of an evening that would mark the beginning of something new, I realized that sometimes the best renovations weren't about transforming spaces. They were about being brave enough to let someone transform you. 7 o'clock? Diana asked. 7 o'clock, I agreed. As I gathered my final tools and prepared to leave Diana's house as her contractor for the last time, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: excitement about the future, curiosity, about possibilities, the particular nervousness that came with genuine hope. The kitchen renovation was complete, but for Diana Martinez and me, something much more interesting was just beginning. That first dinner had been at a small Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles that would have felt cliché with anyone else. But with Diana, everything felt fresh and natural. We talked for 3 hours about everything except kitchens, her consulting work with small businesses, my plans to eventually expand into custom furniture making, places we traveled, books we'd read, the strange experience of watching your child become an adult. "I have a confession," Diana had said over dessert. "I've been thinking about asking you out since that first day you fixed my faucet. What stopped you?" "Fear, mostly. It's been so long since I met someone who made me want to take that kind of risk. And you seemed so determined to keep things professional." "I was protecting myself," I admitted. "After my divorce, I got comfortable with predictability. No surprises, no complications, no chance of getting hurt again. And now I'm thinking that some complications might be worth it." Diana had reached across the table and taken my hand. "I'm hoping you're right about that." The weeks that followed had been a careful dance of discovery. Coffee dates that turned into afternoon walks. Dinner invitations that stretched into evening conversations on Diana's front porch. The gradual revelation of shared values, compatible humor, and an attraction that went deeper than initial chemistry. I learned that Diana woke up every morning at 5:30 to read for an hour before starting her day. That she'd learned to cook watching her grandmother in Mexico City during childhood summers. That she'd cried for 3 days when Sarah left for college, not from sadness, but from pride, and the sudden freedom to rediscover who she was beyond being someone's mother. Diana discovered that I'd started Henderson Home Repairs because I loved the problem-solving aspect of construction, but preferred working directly with homeowners rather than large commercial projects. That I'd been quietly taking woodworking classes for 2 years, hoping to transition into custom furniture design. That I'd never learned to cook properly because Linda had always handled meals, and my post-divorce diet consisted mainly of sandwiches and takeout. "That's unacceptable," Diana had declared after this revelation. "Come over Saturday morning. We're going to change that." The cooking lessons had become our regular Saturday ritual. Diana was a patient teacher, explaining techniques and encouraging experimentation while managing to make even my failures feel like progress. I learned to make proper scrambled eggs, to build layers of flavor in simple dishes, to appreciate the meditative aspects of chopping vegetables and tending to something simmering on the stove. "Cooking is just another kind of construction," Diana had explained. "You're building flavors instead of structures, but the principles are the same. Quality materials, proper technique, attention to timing." By winter, we'd settled into rhythms that felt natural and sustainable. I spent most weekends at Diana's house, and she occasionally stayed at my place when her consulting work required early meetings on my side of town. We'd found ways to integrate our different lifestyles without losing our individual identities. Sarah had given her approval during Christmas break, announcing at dinner one evening that she was relieved her mother had finally found someone who could fix things and cook decent meals. "Though I reserve the right to revoke this endorsement if you break her heart," she'd added, pointing a fork at me for emphasis. "Understood," I'd replied solemnly. "Good. Now pass the mashed potatoes. Jake makes them better than you do, Mom." "Excuse me?" Diana had protested. "Those are my mashed potatoes. I just taught him the recipe." "Yeah, but he doesn't get impatient and overmix them like you do." Watching Diana's mock indignation and Sarah's satisfied grin, I'd felt the particular contentment that comes from being accepted into a family's rhythms and inside jokes. Now, 6 months after that first dinner, I was preparing my specialty: blueberry pancakes that had taken weeks to perfect. While Diana handled the coffee and Sarah regaled us with stories from her environmental science internship with a renewable energy company. "We're working on a project to convert food waste into biogas," Sarah was explaining enthusiastically. "It's incredible how much energy potential is just being thrown away. My supervisor says that with the right infrastructure, we could power Entire neighborhoods using organic waste that currently goes to landfills. That sounds like exactly the kind of work you were meant to do, Diana said, clearly proud of her daughter's passion and expertise. It is. And Jake, you'd love this. We're also designing modular housing units that can be completely self-sufficient for energy and water. Solar panels, rainwater collection, gray water recycling systems, everything you'd need to live off-grid but still have modern conveniences. That does sound fascinating, I said, flipping a perfectly golden pancake. I'd love to see the designs, sometime. I'll send you some photos. Maybe we could collaborate on a project when I graduate. Sustainable housing with custom woodwork elements. The casual way Sarah included me in her future plans, the assumption that I'd be part of their family story going forward, still surprised me sometimes. For years, my life had felt finite and contained. Now it felt expansive and full of possibilities I hadn't considered. Speaking of collaboration, Diana said, settling at the kitchen island with her coffee. I have some news. Sarah and I both looked at her expectantly. I got a call yesterday from Rebecca Chen. You remember her, Sarah? The woman who owns the boutique marketing firm downtown? She's been following my work with small business clients and she wants to discuss a partnership. Mom, that's amazing. Sarah jumped up to hug her mother. What kind of partnership? She's thinking about expanding into consultation for home-based businesses and entrepreneurs who are just starting out. She'd handle the digital marketing and brand development. I'd focus on business strategy and market positioning. We'd be able to take on larger projects while still maintaining the personal touch that makes our work effective. That sounds like a perfect fit for your skills, I said, genuinely excited for her. And it would give you more flexibility with your schedule. Exactly. Which brings me to something I wanted to discuss with both of you. Diana looked slightly nervous, which was unusual for her. She typically approached decisions with the same direct confidence she brought to everything else. I've been thinking about taking a vacation, a real vacation, not just a long weekend or a quick trip to visit relatives. Sarah, you'll be doing your field research in Costa Rica this summer anyway. And Jake, I know you've been wanting to see the Pacific Northwest. Are you suggesting we take a trip together? I asked. I'm suggesting we take a trip together. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Seattle, Portland, maybe sometime in the mountains. I want to see the places you've told me about, and I want to experience them with you. The invitation felt significant in a way that went beyond vacation planning. Diana was suggesting we create shared experiences outside our established routines, test how we function together in new environments, invest in building memories that belong to both of us. What do you think? She asked. And I could hear the slight uncertainty in her voice. I think, I said, setting down my spatula and moving to where she sat. That sounds perfect. Really? Really. Though I should warn you that I have strong opinions about coffee shops, and I will want to visit every independent bookstore we encounter. Diana laughed, the tension leaving her shoulders. I can live with that. Sarah, what do you think about your mother gallivanting around the country with her boyfriend? I think it's about time, Sarah replied, though you should probably make it official before you start traveling together. Make what official? Diana asked. You know exactly what I mean, Mom. I looked at Sarah, then at Diana, and realized that somewhere between learning to make proper pancakes and planning Pacific Northwest adventures, I'd stopped thinking about Diana as someone I was dating and started thinking about her as someone I wanted to build a life with. Sarah might have a point, I said carefully. About what, specifically? Diana asked, though her smile suggested she knew exactly what we were talking about. About making things official, moving beyond dating and into something more permanent. Jake Henderson, Diana said, setting down her coffee cup and giving me her full attention. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting that I love you, Diana Martinez. I'm suggesting that I want to wake up in your beautiful kitchen every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I'm suggesting that we stop pretending this is casual and acknowledge that we're building something real and lasting. Finally, Sarah muttered, but she was grinning. Diana was quiet for a moment, and I felt the familiar flutter of nervousness that came with putting yourself completely on the line. I love you too, she said finally. I have for months. I was just waiting for you to catch up. And now? Now I think we should finish these pancakes, call Sarah's bluff about Costa Rica actually happening this summer, and start planning that Pacific Northwest trip as our first official vacation as a couple. Sounds like a plan? I said, leaning down to kiss her. This is disgusting, Sarah announced cheerfully, but also long overdue. And I want to go on record as saying I predicted this outcome from the first day I met Jake. Looking around Diana's kitchen. Our kitchen now, really. Watching Sarah tease her mother while stealing extra blueberries from the pancake batter. Feeling the solid contentment of Saturday morning rituals and shared plans for the future. I realized that some renovations exceeded every expectation. I'd come to fix Diana's faucet and ended up reconstructing my entire life. Sometimes the best projects were the ones you never saw coming. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.